Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, it's Regit and welcome, as you may know, to International Women's Day. It's come round again and we've been celebrating it on the channel for the past roughly 2 years. The first one we did a stream and the second one was when True Form Paris Cat was introduced, the strongest and most independentist woman there was. And in that video we discussed some of the facets of feminism and some of the ways in which it has been skewed by some of its more extreme members. Today, our strong and independent woman who is getting married to her coach next year, pole vaulter cat, who has been given true form, horrifically, of housewife cat, confining them after so long to the house. Unbelievable, really. But we're going to evolve it, and in this video I would like to discuss with you the branches of feminism. Now don't go away, because this is actual interesting political content, and even if you're not politically minded, it's actually really useful to realise where the kind of militant feminists who disgrace feminism's name, like the hugh-mungus types, how tiny a branch of feminism they actually are. So let's proceed and evolve first of all. Strong and independent, strong and independent, strong and independent. Oh, no, not strong and independent anymore. But Regit, you spawn, I hear you cry. I don't care about politics. Why aren't you playing Battle Cats SMH exclamation mark laugh cry emoji? Well, don't you worry. We're going to be going through, hopefully, a little bit of 3-star Hall of Fame while I explain feminism to you. And to do that, I have got my normal general slot and put some anti-zombies in it. We've got our housewife cat, we got Sarukani, and we got Gangline the Ancient, which should be great. That's against aliens as well. Hence why I've got rid of Meg Aphrodite and we've still got long range from Cyberpunk. So that should be alright. I haven't been to these levels in ages, but we'll just have to experience them. So basically, within feminism, or the degree to which Politics A-level teaches feminism, there are little bun-buns everywhere. That's what there are. Roughly 4.5 different strands, we call them. So it starts off with my favourite feminism, and the feminist that I am personally, liberal feminism. Now, before we go into liberal feminism, I appreciate that a large proportion of my audience is of the American persuasion, and liberal in America is not the liberal that I'm talking about here. The liberal in America is ordinarily, oh for goodness, can I actually start speaking without you ruining my day? To be a liberal in the American sense is essentially just to be left-wing or a progressive, and that's not what it means in an ideology term. Liberalism is actually a huge ideology, massive, encompassing quite far left-wing to quite far right-wing. It's basically, in its watered-down sense, all about freedom. And so essentially what a liberal feminist would argue for is equality. Plain and simple. That's it. We don't need any of this idea of the patriarchy. They would say that the state we live in is just completely devoid of influence or opinion. What happens to be inequality is, well, driven by individuals within society, and that's just what's happened. And what actually would be great is for men and women to be on completely equal footing, having completely the same equality of opportunity. Now, liberal feminism, and actually feminism in its entirety, was started by a fabulous lass called Mary Wollstonecraft back in the ages ago. She talked about reason attributable to men and women. Basically, that women can think as well. That was what we call first wave feminism, because it was actually the very start of it. I especially like this kind of feminism because it isn't pursuing the kind of angry ideology that you see some feminists pursuing in that all men should be destroyed and shot immediately. I think not a very helpful way to think. Instead, we are just looking at giving women equal opportunity to succeed to men, equal pay to men, which is different learned from the gender pay gap, which I think is actually quite an unhelpful way of looking at things that has nothing to do with women being paid less for the same job than men. That is illegal.
Brief side note, that's not to say I accept the idea of women in broadly similar jobs to men being paid a lot less, such as in the entertainment industry. I just think that should be outed as the illegal practice that it probably is. Pay people the same, you know?
What liberal feminism allows you to realise is that if there is inequality, for example, there being 55% of men in a company and 45% women, you don't need to go on an angry rant about it, because women have had exactly the same and equal opportunity to get into the job that men have. And once you have that equality, everybody is treated the same way in any inequalities there are, whether there are 100% women in a company, 90% men, or nobody's employed at all. That is coincidental and is not born out of an inequality that is rooted within society. So it's a very basic form of equality, but the most important form of equality, and what I think it does, is allows us to not get bogged down with this idea that unless every single workplace is exactly split 50-50 and everybody's wages totted up equals exactly the same amount, that will be the only time when equality is completed. That will never happen, and people will never be happy if that is what they are looking for. Why don't we look for equality all round and think, wow, we're all on an equal footing, let's try and succeed? An example of someone who might disagree with that point of view is a radical feminist. Now, that's a term you might have heard of, but it's still not the kind of Twitter feminists that you might be thinking of. No, those are actually a different type within radical feminists. What radical feminists want is change immediately, to destroy the patriarchy, which they very much believe in, that there is a male-dominated society and we need to remove that male domination either by putting in a bit of female domination or equal domination. Whereas liberals don't agree with the idea that there is a patriarchal state because they believe the state is neutral, radical feminists believe that there is a deeply ingrained patriarchy that needs to be removed, and actually starts within families, and that is where you need to start to root it out. Kate Millett, a radical feminist, said patriarchy's chief institution is the family. Liberal feminists, they're like, nah, stay out of people's private business. That is people's private business. If a woman does the housework in someone's private house and they want to do that housework, you shouldn't barge into their house with a huge megaphone and shout, how dare you allow the woman to do the housework even though she wants to do it? That is patriarchal in its nature, and whether it was consented to or not, that's a terrible thing to be doing. A little bit similar to radical feminism is socialist feminism, which I probably don't need to talk about that much because it doesn't have really that much relevance to the whole International Women's Day kind of stuff. Basically, same sort of idea as radical feminists. There's a patriarchy, but the patriarchy is caused by capitalism. Ban capitalism, get rid of it, and you're all sorted. Horrendous simplification, but that's essentially socialist feminism. And to relate this point back to the idea of housewife cat itself, liberal feminist thinker Betty Friedan talked about the idea of the problem that has no name. I mean, that was its name. And the idea was that this problem was women weren't so much oppressed by men, they led sort of very normal lives where they were respected, but ultimately the problem is that their social circumstances confined them to housework. And if you are confined there and don't have the equal opportunity to get to what they call the public sphere, the world of work, that is a problem. In fact, that's a problem that socialist feminists don't like, the idea that women are just doing what is called reproductive work that is unpaid, sort of work around the house. But the issue that is then raised is, if a woman wants to do housework, should she be allowed to? Or should we go in with a megaphone and shout, no, you're setting a bad precedent, go and do something that isn't housework,
even though you like it. So to give an example, a radical feminist might justify that there is still an ingrained patriarchy in society because a business employs 51% men. That isn't a real example, by the way, but the point stands is that because there isn't absolute equality, they would have a sing and dance and shout about it, whereas a liberal feminist would look at the ways that people are accepted into the occupation, and if it's a fair system, it's equality of opportunity, and that is the most important equality that plays upon what they call our foundational equality, the fact that we are all equal from the moment we are born. Now perhaps you would like to hear about the little group within radical feminists that are the kind of ones that cause all the trouble on Twitter. Well, these people are called radical difference feminists. Now their primary aim is not actually equality, because although radical feminists go about their methods in quite a brash way, they still want equality, just the same as liberal feminists do. But radical difference feminists believe the difference is that women are in some respects better. For example, naturally a woman is a better caregiver, better with children, better at arranging flowers, and you may think, well, what terrible stereotypes, what feminist would agree with that? Well, a radical difference feminist, they do believe that these feminine qualities are naturally developed in a woman and that's not society's impact on them. Whereas the view that it's just society gendering people into these roles is called an androgynous view. This view is called essentialists. That's what radical difference feminists are, believing that a woman's gender is actually defined by their biology. Quick refresher on sex and gender. Sex is a man or a woman. Gender, infinite explosion of different identities that you choose for yourself or society rather harshly puts onto you. Simone de Beauvoir, a radical/liberal feminist thinker, said, one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. I'm a man, I should be good at football and I shouldn't cry. Gender identity imposed by society. That is why, if those of you who've paid close attention to the channel cast your mind back to a little questionnaire I filled in, I put my gender as agender, because personally I want absolutely nothing to do with the idea of gender identity. I am happy with my sex being male and not having anything to do with gender. For some people, gender is an incredibly useful construct and good for them. When something's constructed, it ought to fulfill a means, and gender definitely does. It's just important to remember that it's not a biological thing. Finally is the big and strange kahuna of postmodern feminism, which is just loads of things, really. If you're gonna take a very broad view of postmodern feminism, it's questioning what feminism even is, man. What even is a woman, man? And what is a man, woman? You can't really work anything out. Everything's up in the air. It's all a bit philosophical, so I ought to like it. And actually, some parts of it are quite an important view on the injustices people face in society. Bell Hooks said about a concept called intersectionality, where if you are a woman, a black woman in fact, you are oppressed both for being a woman and for being black, which makes it doubly worse. Not really any statement on feminism itself, but just something to add to it and modernise it, because it's postmodern feminism. These kind of radical difference Twitter feminists who want all men to be destroyed, the kinds of people who say the future is female. Here's a thought, why can't the future be equal? Are known as fourth wave feminists. We talked about the first wave, the second wave was getting into a little bit of radical feminism, and then the third wave included a little bit of radical and postmodern feminism. And now, in this age of Twittering, we have fourth wave feminism, what I believe is an extremely angry and unhelpful feminism that gives feminism a fundamentally bad name by just putting hatred on all men for no good reason, instead of trying to work with men to achieve equality, which I want
and I should think a heck of a lot of men want. Of course, that's not to say that all feminists on Twitter are like this. I'm on Twitter and I'm a liberal feminist, so not me. But you do tend to see this kind of vocal minority who are just disgusted by the very existence of men. And it's just important to remind yourself that this is a very tiny sect of feminism that is probably really not a helpful way to be looking at feminism. And choose your feminism. Do you think there is a patriarchy? Or do you just think that basic but important equality is the most important thing? Or is capitalism terrible? I'd be most interested to hear your thoughts on this, and let me know if this informed you in any positive way, because I mean, at least for me, this has been going over some of my politics A-level, so it's definitely helped me in that sense. And I hope that I have helped some of you to understand better about the different types of feminism and my position on it, if any of you were ever interested. I hope this will now allow you to be standing on your own 2 feet. Sister, you'll be doing it for yourself. And as I sing quite badly, I will serenade myself out of this video and out of International Women's Day for this year. Happy International Women's Day to you, and hopefully happy video to you, because I do hope, as I bid you goodbye, that you enjoyed.